Good morning, buenos dias, bonjour, xin chao, ni hao, what's up? It's me, Mr. Jordan. Today we're going to be taking a look at chapter 13 of The Handmaid's Tale. Chapter 13, a brief recap and summary of The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. The narrator, off-read, remembers a scene from the Re-Education Center, the Rachel and Leah Center, when her friend from the past, the real world of America, arrived at the Center for Re-Education. So Moira shows up and there's this brief moment of respite where they get to whisper back and forth between bathroom stalls. So it's this return to the idea of like innocence and childhood. After the brief moment of levity and lightness, there's this really horrible dark scene of another handmaid named Janine, who's forced in a circle to recount her experience of being gang raped and then to victim blame herself when the rest of the women shout at her and point at her. Then there's a succession of quick flashbacks where she's in her apartment fighting with Luke in the past, crying over what to do with their daughter, with their cat, with their lives that they're going to be leaving behind. And then she's trying to escape with her daughter and she's literally transported into some woods. She's like running over fallen and cracked leaves and timbers. And then there's the crack and firing of gunshots coming over their heads, and they finally fall and crash down to the earth and are in this poignant moment hugging and holding each other at the end of the chapter. There's a lot in this chapter. It's very dense, so we're going to really dig into 13 and what goes on, do a lot of analysis and close reading. So it starts with these scenes of sedentary flesh, of women, paintings of their bodies being on display in a harem or on the wall like an object. And this idea also of livestock or pigs being raised and fattened up. So we're talking about boredom and the flesh, and this other kind of grosser allegory of lab rats going under randomized testing and how they'll peck themselves to death or eat themselves in full until they explode. What's happening is that the narrator is comparing herself to a concubine or a prized pig or a lady in waiting, right? This idea that her life is useless, is boredom, except for when she's there to service a man. Ultimately, even the best livestock, the prize pig, is only being raised for consumption. Their final ending will still be the slaughterhouse. There's also this reference to Chopin and Les Sylphides, a reference to sort of these feminine air spirits or fairies. Maybe it's sort of a Moira kind of thing again. Quote, "Their legs fluttering like wings of held birds." And then later in the chapter, she says, "I'm a cloud wrapped around a central object that glows red within its translucent wrapping." So what's actually happened here is that her period's arrived, and this is again signaling failure. She hasn't fulfilled her task or her object, her desire in this household. She hasn't fulfilled her role. Her task, her job is to become pregnant, and she's not doing that. We're told her heart sounds like wave upon wave, salty and red, continuing on and on. So it's the sense of marking time. Later we're told her body is a swamp. It's compared to a fenland in contrast to the heartland of the last chapter. So Offred's at a mental low point here. This is truly like the nadir so far. And likely that's because it's coinciding with her not being able to have a baby and her undergoing the extreme anxiety and duress of thinking maybe she'll be killed or sent to the colonies. To balance this out, we get another flashback of Moira and her sort of lightness, right? So always the binary, light, dark, airiness, weighty, heaviness, sedentary. So when Moira arrives at the Re-Education Center, she has a big bruise, big purple mark on her cheek. She's both red and blue. And also it shows that she's put up a fight, right? She hasn't gone willingly. She's still got that fighting spirit. And she sort of imbibes Offred and the other people in the Handmaid Center with a little bit of their own spirit and energy. But that's quite quickly taken away. So rather astutely, Moira immediately says, "This place is a loony bin." And, you know, she's got this feeling of kind of childish or youthful glee and exuberance that's gone from the narrator's life. And when they chat in the bathroom, they do throw a little hole, right? So what was once a voyeur's hole or a peeping Tom's place to look through has now become their broken telephone. So everything is being channeled or filtered through past uses. There's a really nasty, dark scene here with the Janine character. She's essentially being shamed the same way you would in biblical times or under Stalinism or maybe in Vichy France. What's happening is they're all chanting and participating in this, group think, like her fault, her fault, her fault, her. The idea being that the handmaids are becoming mindless. They're just reiterating this rote statement over and over and over and over again. It's just a crybaby, a crybaby, a crybaby. And you get this really nasty idea of her being taught a lesson and inculcated and basically being made to hate herself and despise herself and her past. And when that happens, that's this moment when you'd be reborn or salvaged, right? So Gilead is beating down Janine so they can remake her in their new image of what a woman should be, this ideal handmaid, which is what Janine becomes. Our narrator admitting that in the moment she got swept away shows us again that she's being brainwashed, but it also shows us that she's guilty or feels badly about participating in this group shaming of Janine. And this carries her away to another flashback of Luke. So when she starts thinking about this guilt, it carries her into the deepest, most repressed memories, and she starts to feel really terrible. Like, as we said, this is really the nadir. And when she's at her low point, even her memories can only be horrible, negative, dark thoughts. So where does she go at her low point? Back to the woods, trying to escape with her daughter, running through darkness as gunshots are flying over her head. This is also really one of the most sort of action-packed, vicious, violent scenes we've experienced so far in the book. They're on the run. They're literally hunted animals, right? This idea of the running man, or like their game, literally. They're being shot at. They're being tracked. They're the prey. Out there are men, predators coming after them. So this chapter ends with her stating the obvious. This is the worst, she says. Of all the dreams, this is the worst. And we again get this idea of her perspective starting to narrow. She's looking through the reverse end of a telescope. The world's becoming smaller and closing itself in around her.